Okay, Chip, we are live on YouTube and we have everyone believe checked in and it's 1 o'clock, so you can begin when you're ready.
All right. Well, I just want to welcome everybody to this month's edition of the Kentucky Monthly Climate Perspective on Drought and Hydrologic Conditions. I'm sure, like most of you, I was up most of the night with tornado warnings and huddling in my basement, so I'm running on about 3 hours sleep. So hopefully everything makes sense. Um, but as always, this webinar series is presented by the Kentucky Climate Center at Western Kentucky University in partnership with the National Integrated Drought Information System and in coordination with the Midwest Drought Early Warning System. And the production and delivery of this webinar is reflected from the contributions of many partners from around the state, including Jerry at the Kentucky Climate Center, the UK Ag Weather Center, and the Kentucky Divisional Water. And our next webinar is going to be May 1st at 2 p.m. Eastern Daylight Standard Time, 1 p.m. Central. And this webinar is being recorded, so you can go back and watch it. It's also being live streamed on the Kentucky Climate Center's YouTube channel. And the picture behind us is from Butler County's Mesonet Station. This was mid-March. That is the Green River kind of flooding into the field there. Um, Probably something we'll be seeing a lot more of here in the next few days. I went and looked at this camera just before the webinar, and it's not quite as far up as it is there, but I'm sure it's going to be making some headway towards the camera as we make go through the next couple days. So, going through the outline, we're going to talk about recent conditions, talk about impacts, and then move on and look up into the future with outlooks and wrap things up. Um, Pictures on the left. The one on the top is from Todd County from yesterday, and that is one of the discrete cells that went up ahead of that squall line yesterday evening. Luckily, those didn't really form like the models were saying. So they really didn't really get their act together and put down any violent tornadoes. The squall line did its fair share, but you can see the rain shaft there of that storm on the right. And down below is from Crittenden County during the middle of the month, and you can see the field where the webcam and measurement station is on fire. Not uncommon to have fires this time of year. Um, until we get leaf on in the forests, um, things tend to dry out very quickly. So even with wet conditions, only takes 2 or 3 days of warm, sunny weather with and low humidity, high winds to dry out that leaf litter, at least the top of it, and get fires. There have been a good number in southeastern Kentucky and across the state, but nothing significant. Just small fires, nothing like they're seeing out in the Carolinas or out in like Oklahoma right now. Looking at the 24-hour precipitation, I put this slide in just before the webinar. And you can see we've had quite a bit of rain since yesterday. And this is just the beginning, but you can see down in Allen County, they're the leading the pack right now off over 4 inches of rain. But you can see all across southern Kentucky there, 2, 3 inches of rain. Um, and still 2 inches across most of the rest of the state. The exception being down there in southeastern Kentucky. Some places not even picking up any rain yet. There is rain around in that area, so I'm sure that sometime today, or if not today, tomorrow and Saturday, that they will pick up some rain as well. I'm looking at the 7 day. This is from 8:17 in the morning. I pulled this, so it includes the rain from last night, but not the ongoing rain that we've had going on this morning, this afternoon. And you can see amounts. This includes the rain that we had back over the weekend. Um, again, 3 inches, a good bet across 3 to 4 inches across western Kentucky into central Kentucky, and lesser amounts when you get into eastern Kentucky and down southeast Kentucky. Around an inch of rain, and like most of that fell over the weekend. Expand out the 14 day. Um, Still a little bit more rain, 3, 4 inches across most of the state. Again, southeastern Kentucky being the low point, but that's a decent amount of rain for a 2 week period, and a lot of that falling in the past week. Um, Looking at the 30 days, so this is for most of March here. You can see central and the west central Kentucky picked up some pretty good amounts of precipitation, um, anywhere from 4 to almost 8 inches of rain across that area. But then you look at far western Kentucky and eastern northeastern Kentucky, see they were significantly drier, only two, yeah, even 1.5 inches or 1.77 inches up in Lawrence County. So those areas were a little drier in March. And we'll get into the precipitation for March here in a minute. But then you expand out to the 60 day, and you can see that picks up the huge rains that we had in the middle of February. And you can see precipitation amounts across western and central Kentucky, 10, 12, 15 inches of precipitation. A little bit less when you get up in the northeastern Kentucky, but you're still 8, 9, 10 inches of precipitation over 2 months. That's still a lot of rain. Um, and that's why a drier March wasn't necessarily a bad thing, because February was just so wet. It was kind of a good thing to dry out a little bit. And really for the whole state, the first half of March was dry, and really needed. And ignore the 4.48 inches down in Clay County. That's the new gauge. So it was just put in, and it did not pick up any of that precipitation that fell in February. So it's not a bad. It's not that they're really dry. It's just a new gauge. And we expand out to 90 days. So going back to pretty much encompassing most of 2025, you can see that white shaded, pink shaded area, 17 to 20 inches of precipitation in 3 months. And you go into southeastern Kentucky where they have been dry, you can see Black Mountain, 21.5 inches of precipitation, Letcher County, 16.5 inches, same with Pike County. So a lot of precipitation down there. Northeastern Kentucky, the quote unquote dry part of the state, still a foot of rain in the first 3 months of the year. So when it comes to the precipitation department, everybody's in good shape, if not way having too much water. Um, Looking at the maps here, this is the percent of normal, and you can see these were pulled yesterday, so they did not include any of the rain from yesterday or from last night. Um, these You can see Western Kentucky and Northeastern Kentucky below normal for the past 30 days, and then much of the central part of the state above normal for in March. So it's kind of some haves and have-nots. But like I said, it was so wet in February, and you can see that in the 60 day, with some places up to twice as much of their normal precipitation um, over the past 60 days. So being dry wasn't necessarily a bad thing. And I apologize if you can hear the dog barking. The garbage men are outside picking up trash, and they're apparently our dog's mortal enemies. So I apologize for that. When we get to 90 day, you can still see a lot of blues and greens indicating that the entire state is above normal and significantly above normal for the past 90 days. Um, when looking at March as a whole, the state averaged 4.4 inches of precipitation, which is 0.17 inches below normal. So about as normal as we're going to see it. And like I said, it's kind of some places got more, some places got less, and it all averages out. And so it was the 59th driest March on record out of 131, so pretty close to being in the middle. And for 2025, the state has averaged 17.14 inches of precipitation, which is over 5 inches above normal and the 18th wettest on record. And I imagine that after this week, um, we'll probably be in the top five for precipitation. And we'll talk more about that. I'm sure you guys are all aware of all the rain that's coming. Um, Temperature departures. March was pretty warm. The state averaged 50.4 inches of, or not 50, 54, 50.4 degrees for the month of March, which is almost 4 degrees above normal. Um, the state, it was the 19th warmest March on record out of 100, actually it should be 131 years, when you include this year. Um, so warm, but not not something like we had back in 2012 or 2007. Um, the highs averaged 6 to 8 degrees above normal. And that's that picture on the bottom right. You can see how the bright reds there, or deep reds. Um, but the low temperatures were really close to normal, are just slightly above normal. So it was one of those where you woke up in the morning. We had lots of nice cool mornings where you put on a hoodie or a jacket, and then when you it come afternoon, it was nice and warm and kind of a perfect spring days. We had a lot of those. Um, and For Paducah, it was actually the fourth warmest March on record, so a little bit warmer out in western Kentucky. Stream flows. You can see here, this is from this morning. So, lots of blues and greens and blacks. The dark blues indicate flows that are in the top 10 percentile, and the black is the top 3 percentile, 98th percentile. So, you can see a lot of water in the streams, and those are just going to keep going up. Now, if you look at the 28th day, if you look especially out in eastern Kentucky in the Leviza Fork, Tug Fork watersheds, you see some orange and red dots out there indicating flows were a little low. Like I said, we had a fairly dry March out there. So, and the flows show it now. Low flows in March. A low flow in March is a high flow in July. So it's not a situation where anybody's close to running out of water. They're just below normal for this time of year, which stream flows are usually pretty high this time of year. Looking at soil moisture, again, most states in pretty good shape. There was a little bit more orange yesterday, and then the rain came through. You see those blues along the Ohio River indicating um, higher than normal soil moisture. And if you look at that bottom picture, it's showing you the um, oh, sorry, that thing got cut off, but that's the relative soil moisture. So what that's saying is that these blue areas, there's already 65% of the pore space is already filled with water, 70% of the pore space is filled with water, essentially saying the soils there are already saturated, and we are dumping more and more water on those. So that's going to lead to a lot of runoff, and a lot of flooding. And looking at the soil moisture from the mesonet stations, the top left there is Warren County. Interesting seeing this right here. That is from January when it was cold and the soil is frozen. So got some false readings showing that soil moisture was very low, but that was just the ground was frozen. But you can see the ups and downs, and you can see the stretch here, um, that being dryness in March, late February, March. Fulton County, you really saw, like I said, it's dry out there. You see the dip there. So soil moisture was down a little bit. Now, that was still 32%. So there's still a lot of moisture in that soil. In the summer, we'd be talking about how wet the soil is. So but for March, it was a little lower than normal, but nothing significant. You can see just the rain we got over the weekend was enough to pull it and bring it back up to normal and actually above normal for that spike there. And then you can see what was coming just from last night. You can see the soils were really saturated. You can see that in pretty much all the graphs. Looking at the U.S. drought monitor, you can see Kentucky is not in any type of drought. In fact, but you see, there's a lot of drought pretty much across the country. Kentucky is one of three states, along with Louisiana and Oregon, that doesn't have any drought or normally dry conditions. So we're kind of the lucky ones right now in terms of drought. Um, though I would imagine next week you're going to see a lot of removal in the Mississippi Valley, Ohio River Valley, with all the rain. But it's very unusual to see this much color on the map this time of year. In the fall, late summer, typically the map gets more color with it, but kind of concerning to see in spring when most country's kind of in their wetter period to see this much drought across the country. Like I said, looking at the state, we have nothing going on drought wise. And looking at the change maps, you can see, especially to our east, in the Mid-Atlantic, um, West Virginia, Virginia, into North Carolina, some degradation. Also in Missouri, and then out in Oklahoma, Texas, New Mexico, things have been drying out instead of getting wetter. But up in the Great Lakes region and also down in the southeast, things have been improving. And again, no change. We haven't had any type of drought here in the past 4 weeks. Looking at some agricultural impacts. The ag benefited from the drier conditions during March. It let soils dry out, let farmers get out into the fields a little bit and do some work in the fields. Winter wheat is really the only crop going on right now. And it is in good shape. 77% of it's listed as good and 8% as excellent. So winter wheat's good. I've passed a few fields in central Kentucky on the way to work, and they've really greened up over the past couple weeks and started taking off. Um, Now, obviously, fields flooding may impact some, so we'll see what conditions are like next month. Um, and hay, we had the drought last year and that really dry October, and farmers were feeding hay early. So there were concerns about the supply, but right now, supply is still adequate across most of the state. And of course, now we're starting to get fields starting to green up and grass starting to grow. So hopefully starting to get away from some of the hay. So hopefully we're in good shape when it comes to hay supply for the rest of the year, or at least the rest of the spring. March storm reports. Now, this is just for March. This does not include last night. Um, Still see some wind damage, also some tornadoes. Um, Most of those occurred this weekend, except for the one up in northern Kentucky. That was about a week and a half ago. So not a super active March, but I mean, still some decent storms that came through and caused some damage. Looking at the tornadoes, the one in northern Kentucky that hit on the 19th actually hit the airport there. You can see the path there. It started at there's some Amazon buildings that they're constructing, and started there, did some damage to the construction, moved across the runways, and right here is the main entrance to the airport and the parking garage and the terminal where the baggage and stuff is. Luckily, it was just an EF1, or else if it was stronger, that could have been a very serious situation. There was some damage to some industrial buildings at the airport. Some cars in the parking lot got damage from debris flying, and it also moved a 747 about 5 feet. So there's still some impressive winds there to move something that big, uh, any distance. Then on the 30th, we had five different tornadoes that touched down kind of in the Fort Knox, Louisville area, and you can see those down here. Um, the one down that started in Meade County and crossed Hardin into Boyd County was on the ground for 31 miles. So kind of a long track tornado. I'm not sure what the exact length is to determine when a long track tornado starts up, but pretty decent, especially the kind of a spin up environment for that's kind of not that's kind of rare for one to be on the ground that long in a spin up. It wasn't discrete supercells; it was more of a line. And the good news with those tornadoes, there was only a couple minor injuries, no deaths. Did cause some damage. You can see some damage to barns and outbuildings in the area, and also tree damage. But all in all, not too bad in terms of damage. Um, Now we're going to talk about what have going on right now. Yesterday we were the Storm Prediction Center put Western Kentucky and parts of the Mississippi Valley in the high risk category for severe weather. Um, that is very rare. Only happens a few times a year. For Kentucky, the last time we had a high risk was March 2nd of 20, what was it, 2012? The big tornado outbreak that hit West Liberty and Salyersville and Crittenden. So yeah, they don't put that out. Yeah, it's pretty rare. So and it I would say that it definitely verified. You see this image right here. This I took a screenshot last night as the storms were crossing the Mississippi, and you can see all the tornado warnings that were going on. I think at one point there was close to 30 tornado warnings, stretching all the way from Arkansas all the way up, and this continued up close to South Bend, Indiana. And you can see down here, all this is all from last night. The red was the tornado warnings, the yellow is severe thunderstorm warnings, and the green is flash flood warnings. So just a unbelievable amount of storms and tornadoes last night. I think I saw something. It was like I believe it was 225 tornado warnings last night. Just an unbelievable amount. Now, obviously, not all of those had tornadoes on the ground, but some of them definitely did. Looking at Kentucky, obviously it's too early for them for the National Weather Service to have gone out and gotten surveys. I don't envy National Weather Service right now. They had a very busy night last night with all these warnings, and now they're having to go out and do surveys while more storms move through. Still issuing warnings and flash flood warnings right now. So they are definitely working hard this week. But we did. I know there were some tornadoes. They haven't been confirmed yet, but it sounds like there was one in Paducah that actually just barely missed the National Weather Service office. It hit the adjacent airport neighborhood, but they were sheltering in place and had to defer to a weather service office in Iowa to issue warnings while they were taking shelter. It sounds like there was also tornadoes in Ballard County, um, in Louisville at the Gene Snyder 60 I-64 interchange. It sounds like there was a tornado. But I'm sure over the next few days there will be reports coming out, and we're still at risk for having tornadoes today, especially in southern Kentucky. And actually I have a screenshot here. Risk for storms and tornadoes today in southern Kentucky, especially across southern Kentucky. Tomorrow it kind of the shifts kind of to the north and west, but still Western Kentucky's under the gun for severe weather. And then Saturday it kind of shifts more back towards Western and Central Kentucky, really the whole state. And saw that they're predicting temperatures Saturday before the storms hit could reach the upper 80s. So there is going to be a lot of fuel for those storms. The top row is the looking at the chances for excessive rainfall. And so today you can see the high and moderate risk across much of the state. In fact, just before I got on, I saw the Storm Prediction Center has put out a special notice for pretty much most of the state saying they're expecting storms to be really building back this afternoon and evening and are concerned for life-threatening flooding for pretty much the entire state. So something to really be in guard on. I know there's already a lot of flash flood warnings, especially down in the Bowling Green area, down at Hopkinsville, that whole part of the state. Looking at tomorrow, again, that axis of heavy rain kind of shifts to the west a little bit. Doesn't mean it won't be raining, just we probably won't get as much tomorrow, so maybe a little break. And then that shift for heavy rain, or that axis of heavy rain, shifts back over Kentucky and the mid Mississippi Valley tomorrow. So a lot still to come. In fact, here is the QPF from this morning. You can still see places. I believe this is still 10 to 15 inches here, down south of Land Between the Lakes, but 7 to 10 inches across the western part of the state, and even central Kentucky, you're looking at 5 to 7 inches of precipitation. So, on top of what we've already gotten, on top of saturated soils and streams that are already high. So, this is setting up to be another just unbelievable flooding event. Um, 2 months after we had one. So, get something to keep an eye on. Make sure you do not drive through flooded roads. I've already seen pictures of cars that have tried to do that and the road wasn't there and nosedive into a gully. Um, Switching gears and looking at ENSO, we are coming out of La Nina. We should be transitioning to neutral this month if we haven't already. Um, and then as we go into the fall, kind of even money on being either neutral or going back into La Nina, and then a slight risk of El Nino. But it's looking like either we'll be neutral or La Nina coming this fall. But that will I'm sure as we move into the summer they'll get a better grasp on what to predict for the fall. Outlooks. After all this precipitation and storms comes through, it looks like we are going to have a cold snap move through. So we're looking at below normal temperatures over the next 6 to 10 days. And also, it looks like near normal to below normal precipitation. So not a probably not a bad thing. Drying out will definitely be welcomed. Um, Same for the 8 to 14 days. You see that colder air starts shifting towards the eastern seaboard as there's a big ridge of warm weather out west. And looking like most of the country is going to be dry, especially the western 2/3 of the country. That would include most of Kentucky. So again, so it looks like after we get through this, at least have a week or so of dry weather, which will be welcome. Let the streams go down, let the soils dry out a little bit. Um, Outlook for April, you can see this bullseye right here. Obviously, that is with this storm system that we're dealing with now. A lot of places already at or above their average precipitation for April, and we're going to be, I would imagine most of the state's going to easily exceed that and double or triple that. So that's why there's a high confidence bullseye right over us. And temperatures kind of equal chances with warmer temperatures to our south. And then the seasonal outlook. So April through June, fairly light, low to moderate expectations of above normal temperatures. And they still have that above normal precipitation bullseye for the Great Lakes, part of the Ohio Valley. It's kind of a still La Nina look to that. And this came out March 20th, so that was not including the rain that we're getting right now, or else they probably would extend that down to this area here because we may get enough, some places may get enough precipitation that they'll be at normal for this whole 3 month time span just this week. Um, Drought outlook. We are in the clear. No surprise there. But they are expecting the removal of some drought up in Illinois, Indiana, Missouri, and then also in Tennessee. And again, with the rain coming through in this whole area, that's not a surprise. Um, Looking at the wildfire, potential for significant wildland fires. Um, we're in the clear again, but you see Virginia, the Carolinas, down to Florida. The Carolinas have already been hit with a lot of fires already, so I expect that to continue for April. And the same thing out in New Mexico, Texas, Oklahoma. There's been fires out there as well. And down below is another picture of the fire at the Crittenden Mesonet station. That's you can see the flames are really close to the station there. And that was on the 13th. And interestingly enough, I went and looked after I saw this. I went and looked at the Mesonet camera there, and the grass is bright green, so it burned through, and the grass has already come back and reestablished itself. So that is good to see. Just a little grass fire there, but no. At least we know the Mesonet station's still working, and I doesn't look like there's any structures nearby. So in summary, March was a warm month with below normal precipitation in the west and east, and above normal precipitation in the central part of the state. Like I said, despite the drier conditions this month, the state remains drought free, especially after all the rain that we had in February. Um, there we are expecting heavy rains and thunderstorms to continue for the next several days. That's going to bring another major flooding event after we just got through with one in February. Um, we are going into neutral ENSA conditions, and we are expecting those to continue into the summer. And then like I said, we're going to have to wait and see if we're going to get La Nina to come back or not this fall. And the Climate Prediction Center is forecasting below normal temperatures in the next week, along with below normal precipitation. So that is all that I have. Again, the next webinar will be May 1st at 2 p.m., 1 p.m. Central. And if you have any questions between now and then, feel free to contact Jerry at WKU at the Climate Center, Matt Dixon at the UK Egg Weather Center, or myself at the Kentucky Division of Water. And open it up to questions.
Chip, I was running some numbers yesterday, and I was surprised that so far this year we're running about average temperature wise, but that 4 degree 4 degrees was surprising to me because my recollection of March was pretty seasonable, but then you look at those low temperatures, and that's what did it.
Yeah. I said it was nice in the morning. It was nice and cool in the mornings, but it really warmed up during the day a lot of times.
Hmm.
And I saw there was a comment. Now I can't get that. There it is. Up and a tornado watch has been issued for South Central and Southeastern Kentucky. So more tornadoes and severe weather expected across the southern part of the state.
We didn't want them to feel left out.
No.
I think I think you may have mentioned this, but we're running what around 140% of average so far this season, so far this year.
Yeah. That
Bef-
number is going to go up.
Right, right. Yeah, that was before this week.
Something to keep an eye on, guys, is that tornado watch. I they're the primary threats. Few tornadoes likely, and they did also put in there a couple intense tornadoes possible. So
Hmm.
something to watch. This severe weather situation definitely not over yet. Scattered damaging wind gusts of 70 miles per hour likely. Scattered large hail events to 1.5 inches in diameter possible. So yeah, 2025 has been wild to say the least. We'll just go with that.
Yeah, that was the thing with the storms last night is not only did you have the tornado threat, but some of those storms were moving at 75 to 80 miles per hour. So just with the forward motion of those storms, you were going to get near hurricane force winds just from that. And so it was I don't think I've seen that. And the other thing is the flash flood watch or the flood watch they put out across the middle Mississippi Valley, including parts of western Kentucky, is a PDS flood watch, which I have never seen one of those before.
Mm.
I didn't know they had PDS flood watches.
This is Ron. I do have a question.
Okay, Ron.
I did see that. I think it was the severe thunderstorm warning last night that the forward cell speeds were at 95 miles per hour, but the threat was 60-mile-per-hour winds. Does that seem? I mean, in my mind, I'm just trying to figure how you have a storm moving faster than the winds it's going to produce, because usually you get higher winds than the motion of the storm. So I'm just wondering if anybody can elaborate um, what's really happening in that cell.
I'll defer to Jerry or Matt.
Boy, I'd have to question that 95 mile per hour estimate. That seems a little too high.
It did to me too. I'll go back and I'll find it and I'll send it to you guys. I'm sure I can pull that warning text back out for I think it was the one for that encompassed the whole area. It was a blanket warning. But when I saw those speeds, I'm like, that's ridiculous.
Yeah, that seems a
You can't
little
outrun
high.
that storm.
No, that I'm
Right,
wondering if
right.
that might have been a typo.
Yeah, it may have been.
Yeah,
It may have been.
yeah.
Well, I will say this, so this is Shane, by the way. The final day that I worked at WBKO was March 3rd, 2023. If anyone doesn't remember that day, that was the one where we had record low pressures established in several cities: Bowling Green, Paducah, Louisville, Lexington
Yeah.
had their number two all time. I remember receiving bulletins on some of the tornado warnings that were issued by LMK late that morning into early afternoon of cells moving 80 miles an hour. So that's the only other time I can remember that occurring.
Yeah, I remember that day because those 80-mile-per-hour winds shredded my roof.
Another footnote, too, and I don't think this has been mentioned at this point. Once this whole mess gets out of here by Sunday, we're going to get an unseasonably cold shot of air early next week. And it would stand to reason because looking at frost and freeze information for several cities, namely Louisville, Lexington, Bowling Green, the over under date for the last one for Lexington, if you will. In other words, a 50% chance of the last occurrence of 32 degrees would be April 13th. It's April 5th for Bowling Green, and it's a little earlier for Louisville, March 31st. But of course, Louisville deals with UHI or urban heat islands, so that skews that date a little bit. But some of the forecasts are calling for temperatures hovering around the 32-degree mark for a couple of nights, namely next Monday night and Tuesday night. So wouldn't be surprising if we get one more freeze, at least a light one, and maybe even some widespread frost, depending on wind and depending on clearing.
And Shane, I'll add on to that. I talked to the National Weather Service yesterday morning before all these storms really started popping. We're going to go ahead and start issuing advisories and warnings for frost and freeze next week. I talked to the fruit specialist. It's been a pretty good year for fruit thus far. We had that colder January, so we didn't accumulate growing degree days like we've done the past few years. So we weren't quite as advanced in development compared to the past few years. But apples, peaches, Pear trees, plasticulture strawberries are all starting to bloom now. So we want folks to take precautions to protect, maybe not so much the trees, but if you got strawberries starting to bloom, you name it, start taking those precautions now. So advisories and warnings are going to start off next week.
Yeah, no
So-
surprise there at all.
So Matt, did that warm March, did that speed things up a little for those fruit trees, or are they ahead of schedule for this for a typical season?
We're still a little behind. I was looking at those degree day accumulations last week, I guess, but still a little bit behind compared to the past few years, just the extremely warm winters we had. We just didn't quite get the head start um, in January, February this year compared to those recent years. So that helped us out, not only the fruit trees, but winter wheat, you name it. Not quite in those advanced developmental stages like we've seen the past few years. So we'll take it. We'll take it. Let's just hope it doesn't get too cold this upcoming week. Shane, what did you say? You saw upper 20s or whatnot? Nope.
Shane, I don't know if you caught
Shane
that.
left.
Yeah, yeah. Man, I was just wondering if the fruit trees were a little ahead of normal because of the warm March, not counting the last 2 years, which are kind of anomalies, but for a 20-year average or 30-year average, are those fruit trees a little early still because of the warm March, or is this pretty much
Whenever
on
I go back,
schedule?
whenever I go back 10 years, it's about an average of those 10 years. So
Uh-huh.
definitely had some that lagged behind, some that were well ahead of schedule. We're pretty much right there in the middle. So, and
Hmm.
I'll take on schedule. There'll
Chip,
probably there. I found out from some county agents a few days ago. There's been some farmers that have put corn and beans in the ground. Not a whole lot, but we'll have to start thinking about replanting more than likely moving forward. This cold air ahead is another headache, but I think myself and quite a few specialists are going to put out some information next week and just telling folks like practice patience. We got a long ways to go through the spring season to get our crops in the ground, and it's starting off on a rough note, but hopefully moving forward it turns in a 180-degree direction. Let's just hope the faucet doesn't turn off in June or something with all this rain we saw recently. So
right.
Yeah, that's always the fear.
yeah.
Chip, just one comment about the El Nino or La Nina cycle that we're in. I had some climate folks tell me yesterday that the ocean waters have actually turned neutral, but the atmospheric memory is persisting as if there's a La Nina. So it was a weak La Nina anyway, but pretty significant impacts for Kentucky, I think. So which look like they're still persisting pretty strongly. So I think that. Those numbers that you showed a neutral phase, and I think technically we're probably in that now, but because the atmosphere is still acting like a La Nina, I think NOAA is still talking as if it's a La Nina. So a little complicated, but
Yeah.
we'll see how long that memory persists. And it's kind of a fine line between the neutral weak La Nina, I mean weak, yeah, La Nina phase and a neutral phase anyway. But we'll see. Any other questions, comments? Right. Anything else, Chip?
I, I'm good.
All right. Well, thanks for an excellent summary, and it's been an interesting few months, to say the
Yeah.
least. So, well, thank you everyone for attending, and we look forward to having you again with us next month. So, thank you, everyone. Thanks, Chip.